war between Russia and Ukraine. Two countries that share cultural ties that dates back centuries is one that many people across the world find shocking, given the ties between the two nations. The conflict between both countries that started in 2014 erupted into a full-scale war in 2022 and continues till this very day, taking the lives of hundreds of thousands, displacing many of the citizens of both countries and disrupting their lives in no small way. The current conflict between Russia and Ukraine is deeply rooted in a complex tapestry of historical events and territorial disputes that date back centuries. The current war is not merely a confrontation between two nations, but rather a battle over national identity, sovereignty, and geopolitical power. In this video, we will unravel the history behind this contentious relationship by examining key events that have shaped the dynamics between Russia and Ukraine. To understand the historical backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it is essential to look back to Kievan Rus, a federation of Slavic tribes that existed during the 9th to the 13th centuries. This early stage is considered a foundational chapter for both Russian and Ukrainian national identities. Kiev, present-day Ukraine's capital, was a significant cultural and political hub in this federation. Kievan Rus eventually fell apart due to Mongol invasions and internal strife, leading to the region's fragmentation. As Kievan Rus dwindled, various powers like Poland, Lithuania, and later the Russian Empire began to exert influence over the territories that currently comprise Ukraine. The legacy of Kievan Rus continues to be a point of contention, with both Russia and Ukraine laying claim to its heritage. In the late 14th century, much of Ukraine fell under the control of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and later the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The period saw cultural and religious divides deepening as Western influences from Poland clashed with the Eastern Orthodox traditions that were dominant in the region. The Cossack rebellions of the 17th century, particularly that of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, marked a significant uprising against Polish rule, leading to the establishment of an autonomous Cossack hetmanate in Ukraine. The Treaty of Pereyaslav in 1654 marked a pivotal moment. The Cossack hetmanate sought military support from the Tsarist Russia against Polish domination, effectively placing Ukraine under Russian protection. This decision would set the stage for long-lasting ties that would become increasingly complicated in the following centuries. By the 18th century, Ukraine was fully absorbed into the Russian Empire. Tsarist policies promoted Russian culture and suppressed Ukrainian identity, language, and literature. Attempts by Ukrainian intellectuals to revive their cultural heritage faced stiff opposition from the imperial authorities. This suppression intensified under the rule of Tsar Nicholas I, and subsequently during the late 19th century, when Ukrainian nationalism began to gain momentum in response to Russification policies. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw a resurgence of Ukrainian national identity, marked by the establishment of cultural organizations and political movements advocating for greater autonomy. The tumult of World War I and the subsequent Russian Revolution would lead to drastic changes across the region. Following the Russian Revolution of 1917, Ukraine briefly declared independence, leading to the formation of the Ukrainian People's Republic. This independence was short-lived, as Ukraine was soon embroiled in civil war, and the Bolsheviks sought to solidify their control over the territory. By 1922, Ukraine was incorporated into the Soviet Union. The early years of Soviet rule were marked by severe hardship, including famine and repression under the policies of collectivization in the 1930s. The Holodomor, a catastrophic famine that swept through Ukraine from 1932 to 1933, resulted in the deaths of millions of Ukrainians and is viewed as a deliberate act of genocide against the Ukrainian people. This tragic chapter not only left a deep scar on the collective memory of the nation, but also sowed the seeds of resentment towards Moscow. The devastation brought by World War II further complicated Ukraine's relationship with Russia. While many Ukrainians fought against Nazi occupation, Soviet rule continued to enforce repression. After the war, the USSR sought to rebuild its political presence in Ukraine, often suppressing dissent and promoting Russian culture. By the late 20th century, Ukraine's desire for independence was burgeoning. The political changes in the USSR during Mikhail Gorbachev's perestroika and glasnost policies led to increased calls for sovereignty. In 1991, following the failed coup against Gorbachev, Ukraine declared independence, an event that would reshape its future and relationship with Russia. Ukraine's newfound independence came with a multitude of challenges, including political instability, economic hardship, and corruption. The country struggled to forge its national identity while grappling with the legacy of its complex past. The division between pro-European and pro-Russian sentiments became a significant fault line, reflecting the contrasting aspirations of the Ukrainian populace. In 2010, Viktor Yanukovych, a pro-Russian candidate, was elected president, stoking tensions between the western and eastern halves of the country. Western Ukraine's inclination towards European integration clashed with the eastern regions, where many citizens felt a strong affinity for Russia. In March 2014, under the pretense of protecting ethnic Russians and Russian speakers in Crimea, Russia launched a military intervention, leading to the annexation of the peninsula. The Kremlin's actions were met with widespread condemnation from the international community, which viewed the move as a violation of international law. The annexation marked a turning point in the relationship between Ukraine and Russia, transforming a political dispute into an open conflict. Following the annexation of Crimea, pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions initiated armed uprisings against the Ukrainian government. This led to a full-fledged conflict that would become known as the Donbas War, characterized by trench warfare, artillery shelling, and significant civilian casualties. Despite Ukraine's attempts to regain control of the separatist-held territories, Russian support for the rebels, both militarily and through the provision of arms, added a formidable challenge. The Ukrainian military struggled against the well-equipped and organized separatist forces. International efforts to negotiate a ceasefire, including the Minsk agreements, produced limited results and failed to de-escalate the conflict. Throughout 2021, tensions escalated as Russia amassed troops along its border with Ukraine, leading to international concern over a potential invasion. Despite diplomatic discussions aimed at de-escalation, the situation deteriorated rapidly. In January 2022, Western intelligence reports indicated that Russia was prepared for a significant military offensive. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, citing the need to protect Russian speakers and denazify the Ukrainian government as justification for its actions. This invasion marked a dramatic escalation of the conflict, sending shockwaves throughout the world and prompting a swift response from the international community. The invasion sparked unprecedented unity among NATO and European nations, leading to an extensive sanctions regime against Russia. The response included arms shipments, financial aid, and humanitarian support to Ukraine. Various countries around the globe rallied to assist Ukraine, emphasizing the importance of sovereignty and international law. Ukrainian forces, motivated by a fierce sense of nationalism and support from the populace, put up a determined resistance against the Russian military. The war became one of attrition, with significant battles occurring in key cities, and the Ukrainian army employing guerrilla tactics to combat the larger Russian forces. As the fighting intensified, the humanitarian situation in Ukraine worsened dramatically. Millions were displaced, cities were devastated by aerial bombardments and ground assaults. International organizations reported high rates of civilian casualties, and numerous instances of war crimes emerged, leading to widespread outrage and calls for accountability. The influx of refugees into neighboring countries created one of the largest humanitarian crises in recent memory, with millions seeking asylum and support. While many countries stepped forward to provide refuge and assistance, the sustained pressure on national and regional resources raised concerns about long-term solutions for those affected. The conflict has significantly impacted Ukraine's national identity, steering the nation closer to the West and reinforcing its desire for independence and sovereignty. The ongoing war has fostered a renewed sense of unity among the Ukrainian populace, bridging divides that existed prior to the conflict. As the battle continues, Ukrainian society is increasingly focused on nation building, democratic governance, and integration with European institutions. For Russia, the invasion signifies both a failure and a gamble. Putin's government seeks to reassert its influence over former Soviet territories while quelling any aspirations for NATO expansion. However, the war has proven costly, with heavy losses on the battlefield and growing dissent within Russia. International sanctions have caused economic hardship, further straining the country's resources and stability. The conflict's implications extend beyond the borders of Ukraine and Russia. It has fundamentally altered the global geopolitical landscape. NATO's unity has strengthened, while countries around the world have been forced to reassess their security policies in light of Russia's aggressive stance. The war has also raised questions about energy dependence, particularly in Europe, as nations seek to diversify their energy sources in response to supply disruptions resulting from the conflict. The history behind the war between Russia and Ukraine is rooted in centuries of intertwined cultural heritage, political ambitions, and national aspirations. From the early days of Kievan Rus to the current struggle for identity and sovereignty, the conflict is emblematic of broader themes of power, resistance, and the quest for self-determination. The events leading up to the 2022 escalation highlight the complexities of international relations and the precarious balance of power in Eastern Europe. As the world watches the ongoing conflict unfold, the hope for a peaceful resolution remains. The path to reconciliation is fraught with challenges. The war serves as a reminder of the importance of understanding history and the delicate connections that bind nations together. The quest for peace requires a commitment to diplomacy, dialogue, and a willingness to respect the rights of all people to define their destinies. The future of Ukraine and its relationship with Russia will undoubtedly be shaped by the ongoing conflict and the resilience demonstrated by its people. The war underscores the fundamental human desire for freedom, security, and the unwavering belief in the right to exist as a sovereign nation. The lessons learned from this tumultuous history will resonate for generations to come, highlighting the need for a collective commitment to peace and understanding in a world where tensions often simmer beneath the surface. If you like this content, please support us by watching another video, liking and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any future content.